welcome back to Veteran Nation, everyone. And before we get started, as always, go to www.nrnplus.com/VN. You can subscribe to the network and support all the independent content creators that we have here at Veteran Nation. And we're getting into today's show, and we're going to start off a little bit different than what we normally do. We're going to be going through some of the headlines that have been going on out there. So today, I don't know if you watched the Military Times, TC, but today they had a story. The Army, junior enlisted, they all may lose their email access because the Army's converting over to Microsoft 365. They're calling it Army 365. So they're all going to lose their emails, all the junior soldiers. And the most affected will probably be the leadership, who now will have to get off their ass and walk down the hall to tell them what to do.
Gee, I don't. How do you really feel?
We both know that's what's going to happen because, yeah, there's a bunch of those lead by email people.
Well, I just want to know is like if this at some point is going to affect the Marines, and does that mean that the senior Marine staff will have to continue writing in crayon?
It's going to make a bunch of lieutenants very unhappy people, but they're already unhappy people. At least once they get to the fleet. When they show up to the fleet, they're all, the next story I was reading, 30% of the sailors and Marines have admitted to they prefer using IUDs as contraceptives. They're leading the other services. So that's the two biggest populations who are using those. Now that's a lot different.
Wait. This made a headline.
This made a headline, yeah, on Military Times.
So the Military Times felt like this was worthy of a headline. Preferred contraception.
Hey, it's Marines. What can I say? Then this other story. Now, this one near and dear to you and me. Tinnitus and depression were decided upon, or were reported to be the most common ailment among veterans. Now, I actually have dealt with both. How about you?
I'm sorry, what? I can't hear you. I've got a ringing in my. Exactly. It makes me kind of sad. So.
Yeah, pretty much. If you've been in the military long enough, you're going to have the two of them. However, one of the
honestly, I've never really dealt with tinnitus, but I probably shouldn't say that publicly.
It will affect you in your life if you've been around shooting and the loud stuff that we were. Like, I was around tracks and tanks for years. It took several years for it to catch up to me, but it eventually did. Now, they did ask as a follow-up question to those veterans why they thought they had depression, and the number one answer was that goddamn bell. Another top story, 12,500 Marines are facing separation. The Marine Corps Commandant, General Berger, is blaming disinformation and fake news, saying that they're not getting the jab because of all this false information that's out there. He also stated that if anyone makes a video calling for accountability of it, he's going to immediately throw him in the brig. So he's definitely on brand.
Are you worried?
I am not.
So is he only extending that brig threat to the people that are actually in still?
Only
because I mean, they could come for you, Skipper.
If they want to come for us veterans, it's going to be a lot of fun in that brig. In fact, I'd probably be like, yeah, put me in. I'm going to enjoy my time with those guys. And then the last headline that I saw today that I was like, you know what? I really want to talk about this. This is not military. It's Amy Winehouse. And I know you're going to be like, what about Amy Winehouse? Her last dress that she ever purchased was auctioned off for almost $250,000. Did you place a bid?
Pretty safe bet that would be a no, Skipper.
I didn't, because when I saw the dress, I looked at it and was like, oh, that is so 10 years ago.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Theory to delete that portion of the video.
These jokes, fans, these jokes are not going to get better as the season continues. It's just going to get worse. But there's a lot of big things. Okay, we're done with the
Did you just say they're going to get worse?
They are going to get worse because they're. I am right now the only one writing them, so
That's unfair to me.
we're going for quantity over quality.
Clearly.
But did you see about the USS Harvey Milk?
Well, no, I didn't until you told me about it. And I'm
just gonna keep texting you this stuff. You're gonna be like, oh, really?
No, I actually almost rather you not tell me about it until recording time.
You know what? I'll do that in the future. I'll do a couple, and I'll just shock you on air and get your absolute.
I did they give us a reason why?
They did not. I can guess as to what reasons. I don't know who was the one who sponsored this bill. I would imagine it was probably one of the California senators, being or California congressmen, because they think Harvey Milk is the greatest thing ever. And do you know a lot about Harvey Milk?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of and versed in his politics and his life, and I mean it.
For those of you who don't know, his death was spoofed in RoboCop, so definitely check out RoboCop.
And for those of you that want an accurate representation of history, do not check out RoboCop.
But really, you should check out RoboCop because RoboCop is awesome.
The views expressed by Skipper do not necessarily represent the views of the entire network, and especially the co-host.
I think RoboCop is a masterpiece of filmmaking. Paul Vanderhoeven, really good director. Definitely has a clear vision. They were actually building a RoboCop statue in Detroit several years ago. I think they got enough money, but I don't know if it's been fully built yet. And I really hope one day they build that RoboCop statue.
How much money does it take to build a statue in Detroit now? I mean, honestly, it would. I mean, the real estate alone, they would end up paying you to have the land.
At $200,000 for the statue to be built, $5,000 for the land it's going to be put on, and then another $500,000 just for security that it doesn't get vandalized.
And then another $1.5 million to whatever politician signs off on the waiver.
Go back to Harvey Milk. This was controversial for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's a political move to try to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't like when the military's brought into politics, but it seems to be the name of the game right now, because every decision that seems to be getting made as far as the military is concerned is absolutely political. But this one, a lot of people have been outraged because I don't know if you're aware, Harvey Milk in his 30s was in a relationship with a young boy who was 16, and at that time, consenting age in California was 18. So a lot of people are accusing them of whitewashing pedophilia. I understand naming it after a gay service member. Harvey Milk was thrown out of the military for being gay, but I wouldn't have chose him. I would have probably gone with general.
But what about the number? But what about the number of people who were thrown out for any other number of reasons? I mean, I don't care what your position is on the issue. Period. I just frankly, I don't think we should be naming military installations or vehicles or ships after any schmo, quite frankly, until they've been long dead and actually did something that served the military and served the nation in a phenomenal way. And if their argument is that, Harvey was a trailblazer, so to speak, for gay rights, then we should be naming numerous military vehicles and craft after numerous people because of the things that they have done. Mm-hmm. Why isn't there a squadron, an Air Force squadron named after every single one of the members of the Tuskegee Airmen?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, quite frankly, Harvey's famous for being bold about his sexuality. The Tuskegee Airmen suffered.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't want to downplay anybody's, the way they feel they've been oppressed, or the way that history perceives them as having been oppressed, or anything like that. But I think there, at least in the case of Harvey Milk, I think there was more than enough things to be like, yeah, this is not somebody who we really should be naming a ship after. I would have absolutely said, okay, yeah, let's consider homosexual activists to be, a part of it. And I would have looked through and said, okay, who meets the standard? Like I said, Tammy Smith, first openly gay general. She's still alive though, but that's someone to me is less controversial than someone who, you could make a credible case of pedophilia, and is that really what we want people to think of? As we're tearing down statues because of flaws in other, historical leaders past, I don't think doubling down on the problem is going to solve anything. So,
well, but we're also seeing a move in society, culturally, towards a normalization of pedophilia, and they deny it, but they're moving that way. So, I mean, I don't know. I have an issue with. I don't care why he was kicked out of the military. I don't care. I literally don't care why he was kicked out of the military. What I care about is, does the military have an obligation to be naming aircraft or seacraft or anything in a fleet after anybody, period? Are they obligated? And if we are, shouldn't we be naming it after? I mean, I could think of a few people who have served recently that have done a lot more by way of heroism.
I'm not going to take credit for it because I did see it on Twitter. It was someone else's joke, but I saw where someone said, why don't we name it after the guy who killed Hitler?
Oh,
yeah.
That's
but it's
he's still down in Brazil.
There's a whole show about it. But yeah, there's a lot of this activism going around, and I don't think I think a lot of it is seeking really more to divide us than unite us. And we should be looking for people who are absolutely, without question, people that we can hold up to younger generations and say, this is who we aspire to be, type of thing. So that's my 2 cents on it. But you've been doing some activism.
Yeah, that's one way of saying it. Actually, I'm not probably talking about the school board stuff that we obviously mentioned, pre-show. It's regionally here, a lot of school
activism that you're doing. You're just videotaping.
Well, which is activism now these days, when I'm doing it, it's probably considered insurrection. If it's you shooting video of your buddy throwing bricks through a window and burning down a liquor store, that's activism. So what I'm doing is clearly just insurrection. But so I've had a couple of pretty interesting incidences over the last couple of months, and we talked about this once before already. with school boards using their policies to silence dissent. And what they do is they put a policy in place and say, you had to be in this building, you have to have a mask over your face, and you can't be here, you can't speak or whatnot unless you cover your face, which when you look at it is immediately a prior restraint on your First Amendment liberties. And the arguments being made, and people need to pay attention. This is not just a Minnesota thing. This is how we've seen a lot of this play out nationally, but we're starting to see this really come to light here in Minnesota because people are really starting to stand up. And I may or may not be behind some of these groups, egging them on, telling them, you guys have got to get, I'm tired of hearing people complain about my school board did this and my school board's doing that and my school board's doing this. And I'm like, well, I can't do it all for you. One of you is going to have to stand up and do this on your own. And I had an incident a few weeks ago where I was part of a group that was run out of a school board meeting under the threat of arrest for trespass and for obstruction, while none of what we had done came anywhere near a violation.
You can't just trespass because you don't like someone there. You have to ask them to leave, and then they have to refuse, and then you trespass them. And you can't arrest them for it out of the gate. And we were threatened with arrest for trespass and for obstruction. And this was by people that I worked with for, in tandem with for almost 13 years. And so a couple of weeks ago, we had a young man that I have recently become friends with who was trespassed from the Rochester, Minnesota Public School Board, our public schools property, who has a medical exemption. And they flat out told him that they didn't care about his exemption, that they demanded that he cover his face. And they did trespass him. And we have video of that. And now tonight, another friend of mine was given a trespass order, and that's the school district I mentioned here just a couple of minutes ago. And the Dover Iota School District in Minnesota was given a trespass order tonight for refusing. And go ahead. Do you guys have any civil rights attorneys reaching out to you, or have you reached out to any?
We've got people that are interested, but you see the problem is, and this is what a lot of people are running into, is even the pro bono organizations that are out there that allegedly come from a constitutionally minded, more conservative, traditionalist bent, really don't want to take cases unless it's going to make them famous or it's going to look good for them. So and I'll use this to tie into another topic here in a minute, but that's really what it is. Everybody, I'll take, if you have this happen, or if you have this happen, we'll take your case and we'll do it pro bono, or we'll do it on a contingency or whatnot. But it's got to be big enough for them to really say, "Ooh, this is going to make us a name," or it's going to appeal to my name that I have already established for myself. And so in a lot of situations, you're still dealing with people that it's pretty self-centered, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking everybody in that legal world that are attorneys that are barred.
I think, because we come across, and then even if you do find a lawyer, you have to even worry about their motives, because as you said, there are those who are very narcissistic. They're looking to make a name for themselves rather than actually, win a case or protect somebody's rights. And I watch Robert Barnes quite a bit. I don't know if you watch him, and he's been talking about a thing we want to talk about later, the Rittenhouse trial. And he's had a lot, he successfully represented the Covington Catholic kid. And, as it applies to Rittenhouse, he's been very critical of the way the defense has moved forward with the case. He's been critical with the way that the GoFundMe money has been used. He's been critical on a lot of different things. And, it's really opened my eyes that, these people who are on our side, are they really on our side? And,
oh yeah, it's you cannot operate in the legal world on your own and have much success. I have a friend, Lisa Hansen, owns the Interchange in Upper Lee, Minnesota. She has been interviewed. I was one of the first people to interview her and tell her story from her perspective on my Minnesota Black Robe Regiment channel on YouTube. And I've continued to tell her story, and my own fight kind of developed because of telling her story. And she is representing herself, and the courts are cracking down on her. Like she's representing herself in some civil cases where she's filed civil suits against different appointed and elected servants. And she's now got a judge telling her that if you come in here and represent yourself, I'll hold you in contempt. For representing yourself. Now,
I would say that's definitely grounds for an appeal.
It's grounds to have him removed, but the courts won't remove him because, well, he's just watching out for her. And I've made this joke to Lisa. There are some, what do they say about a person who has themselves for an attorney, or for an attorney that has themselves for a client? They're representing a fool, right? So, but what we're dealing with in a lot of these situations is you cannot fight the system on your own. You have to speak legalese.
I'll give you the same advice. I actually, because of this show, there's a lot of veterans who reach out to me, and I've been talking with the one who is a guy that I've been friends with for a couple of years, but he reached out to me because of my reach with the network and the show, and some of the things he was talking about military divorce and how some of these states are ignoring the laws. And I gave him this advice, and I'll give it to you, and maybe we can take this conversation into the Facebook group and develop it even more there. When you create a coalition of people, even if it's just 15, and you organize that group, and I'll reference a group that I dealt with earlier this year, the Mama Bears out of Iowa. I got to interview them when they were here in Anaheim. And this was
love the Mama Bears. Met him in person.
Yep.
A couple of weeks ago. Gonna have him on my show.
Those two women are great, and they created a coalition and said we don't want our kids wearing masks and not being treated differently than the other kids, and they were able to get laws passed. So you have to first off, not so much organize, but create create everyone a place for them to go, and then get them to sound off and say these are the things that are the most important to us. Once you do that, then you can organize and say, okay, we are going to officially be this group. We all are members, correct? And get everyone to affirm that. And then now you're a group. Lawyers are more likely to represent a group. And this is what I was talking to my friend when he was talking. And I told him, I said, look, you're a veteran. I'll have you on the show. However, if you get a group going, and he's doing that now, he's getting this group for military divorce. And I said, now you're going to be able to get more onto different media, because now you're representing a group, and you can say these 15 things are what we are about, and this is what we want to do. And then you're easier to be vetted by the news organization, in your case, an attorney. And then you can definitely get things heard. And you can also, via social media, you can spread the word on a lot more things and get more things pushed out to the forefront. So that's some of the advice I would give you guys. But
well, you move it into the realm of class action, really, is what you move it into when you have enough people.
Yeah, it is.
And corporations and organizations are terrified of class action because they pay out on that forever.
As are school boards.
And
one thing school boards hate, it's getting sued. We dealt with a thing here in this area here. The sheriff in this county will not enforce any mask mandates. Well, the school board is trying to push masks. So what they've done is they've told the local Little League, hey, you can't play on our football fields. So now our Little League team has to literally drive up a mountain that's very dangerous to play on a football field. And the whole thing is, well, safety. It's like, well, yeah, they can get sick, but they can also survive and be fine. But yet going up a mountain every other week is more likely to get them injured. So, locally, word was passed in some of our different groups and stuff. I know I made a phone call to our school superintendent, and I'm going to be at the next school board meeting to talk about it because.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be starting to bail Skipper out of jail. And bail Skipper out of jail fund. So
to GoFundMe the Skipper.
You can send that money directly to me. I promise he'll get it. So
your PayPal. But yeah, that's what I think is what we're gonna have to do. As you saw in Virginia, parents who are voters really come out to vote when it means that their kids are being messed with. And yeah, it's something that you can definitely corral and create a coalition on. So that's what I would suggest starting to do is moving it into that next realm. I wish I were up there in Minnesota with you because I would be right there, right there next to you.
We would be standing well behind me holding the camera. No, so now I've got, these two friends that, Patriot allies that have been, trespassed, and somebody's got to be, willing to be the bullet catcher on that one, and really kind of go out and fight this. The problem is the courts are corrupt. I don't care what anybody says, the courts are corrupt, and that leads me into what we were talking about, and you had mentioned already.
The same way, the courts are just like the people who are on the school boards, just like the people who are your government officials. They're scared of angry groups of people like yourselves. They're very scared of you.
Well, I don't even think and I get what you're saying, Skipper, but I don't think anger is the right descriptor, quite honestly, I think what you're seeing is anger would imply to some degree a lack of understanding of what's happening. I think actually outrage is probably a much better, when you confuse a dog, the dog gets angry. Dogs don't get outraged.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a place for, there is a place for anger, but it's that instantaneous reaction. But what you're seeing right now is outrage on the part of the people.
And it's an attack on the First Amendment more than anything.
But no, I disagree I agree with you in that what they're doing is an attack on the First Amendment, but what's got the people outraged is not the attack on the First Amendment. What has people outraged? What has people outraged is what's been happening right underneath their noses for so long. And as you've heard me say, and others have heard me say, that's our fault. Yeah. We own that, every single one of us. And what they screwed up in was going too far, too fast, with way too much. And it's like that. It's like the guy in your unit, whether you're military, wherever you are in the military, whether you're the Marines or you're in the Army, especially when you're talking ground forces and infantry. It's that one guy that he does not understand the purpose of running in formation, right? He does not understand that running in formation is to train you to move as a unit. Mm-hmm. And you get into a battle situation where whether it's you're moving in an infantry maneuver or your mech infantry or whatever it might be, he's the guy that literally gets 3 miles ahead of everyone else, and is all of a sudden he's surrounded. Mm-hmm. They move too far and too fast with way too much stuff.
Yeah.
And it's outraged people. And now they're being cut off, which is what prompts the School Board Association in the United States to send in a letter to Merrick Garland and say, we got to do something about these domestic terrorists. And now they admit that even that was a setup.
Yeah.
That the Justice Department was in on the writing of that letter because they didn't know what else to do, because people are outraged. They've noticed.
They don't know how to engage with people who disagree with them, because many of them, and they accuse people like you and I of this, they actually live in an echo chamber and are afraid when their ideas are challenged, when their worldviews are challenged. As you know, I love it when people challenge my worldview and tell me I'm wrong, because now I have to defend my beliefs and my positions, And it means ultimately my beliefs and positions are going to be much more vetted, much well thought out by me because now I know how to defend it.
Now, if we
Whereas,
could just get you to do that with your jokes.
no, never. I love them the way they are. But yeah, you know that's where this is. This is where this all comes from. Is from people who they don't like what you and I would have to say. They don't appreciate our freedoms, and our freedom is not what I'm going to grant you. Freedom is the things of that you're going to do that I'm willing to tolerate that I don't agree with. That's what freedom is. If I don't care what you're doing, you have total freedom. The moment I start caring about what you're doing, now your freedom's being limited.
Yeah, and so here, segue. This is your official segue warning. It's going to be a new part of the show.
Are you giving me a segue?
I'm giving you a segue. You want to talk about freedoms being limited. You had mentioned the New York Supreme Court conversation about carrying firearms and whether or not it's okay to permit, not like actually allow, but to require a permit or a license for somebody to do something that is a constitutionally enshrined, God-granted liberty, such as carrying a weapon. And that ties into the conversation that's been taking place, obviously, for the last week and a half. That's on everybody's mind if you're paying any attention to culture and society right now, especially if you're a veteran, by the way, because this is a very important conversation, I think, for veterans to be having, is what's happening to Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
What did you serve in the military for? What was your whole point of serving in the military? To protect and defend the Republic and to protect and defend the Constitution. And now some people, well, I joined for the college money. Well, you were an idiot. You know that most of you are never going to go to college, and if you haven't gone already. And so the truth of the matter is that what we're dealing with in the Rittenhouse case is not an issue of whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse actually broke a law. Demonstrably untrue that he broke any laws. Every accusation that has been made against him has been proven to be untrue. The accusation that he brought that AR-15, that assault style weapon, across the border from Illinois into Wisconsin has been proven by the prosecution to be untrue. The prosecution proved it was untrue.
Someone said today, "Oh, we brought it across 2 state lines." No, we didn't.
No, yeah,
it was in Wisconsin. He came across state line, but only one
right.
State.
And the person that bought it for him wouldn't let him carry it.
Yeah,
back into Illinois. He said no, as long as until you're old enough to carry this, transport this, you will be leaving this here in my possession under lock and key. So what we're dealing with the Kyle Rittenhouse case is an example of what did you join the military for? Everybody that's ever taken that oath, what did you take that oath for? And you want to talk about outrage? He literally is a poster child, quite frankly, for trigger control. One, watch the videos. Some of them are incredibly graphic. In not for the weak of stomach by any stretch of the imagination, but incredibly well trained young man. Everything that he did was by the numbers and by the book. I know people who have been in the military and the law enforcement couldn't do what he did. And some people would say, well, that's an example of premeditation. No, that's an example of someone who was very well trained in what he was doing.
I think,
he's a poster child for self-defense.
Once you have literally a video of him running and being chased.
Yep.
That to me is where it should have ended, because when you're being chased by someone, regardless if you have a weapon or not, and you believe that person to have ill intent on you, you're doing, because everyone says there's stand your ground laws. Yeah, there are, but still, even with states with stand your ground laws, some of them say if you're in public, you still have a duty to flee first. and he was absolutely fleeing in conjunction with almost every state that's all that with any type of law like that on the books. He would have been easily determined to have been well within his self-defense rights. And what one thing that someone said to me years ago, and I've always paid attention to it, was look at which side is being very cavalier with the truth and with facts, and that's the side who's losing because they don't have the facts on their side. And I always look at that and try to look at that. And I'll tell you, the gun control lobby, who's really going after Kyle Rittenhouse, they have groups like Everytown on their side. Now, if you've ever looked at the FBI statistics and Everytown statistics, they do not match up. And the reason being is because Everytown, that group takes things like a man who committed suicide on the street adjacent to a school, they consider that a school shooting. That's not a school shooting. There are many cases that if you actually look at their stats,
that's not just every town. The FBI's own statistical analysis says that if a teacher goes into his car, sits down, and commits suicide in his car with a gun, we will list that as a school shooting.
Well, at least that would be on school property. Every town is considering those that are not even on school
right, but
property.
every town is relying on the FBI on this one.
Well, no, actually, every town does compile their own statistics.
Oh, okay.
But at least with the FBI, they clearly identify here's the objectionable things that we're going to categorize these. So it's very objectified. So if it meets these criteria, it's going to be in this thing. Whether or not is that's the way it's defined correctly is going to be the issue. But at least you know where it's going to end up when you read the actual facts about whatever the shooting is going to be. The FBI statistics take, a lot of they themselves are skewed because they include suicides as not gun violence, but gun deaths. So that's why you see people use those statistics. But if you take away suicides, it drops by almost half. And the other thing is when they compare the U.S. to other countries, if you were to take away the cities with the most oppressive gun control measures on gun owners, places like Detroit, Chicago, New York City, Baltimore,
Washington, D.C.
If you take those out of the statistics, the U.S. goes from being at the top to being at best in the middle, really down in the bottom third. That whenever you see people messing with the statistics, that's who you know who's losing the argument.
But let's do this for the sake of transparency. Let's leave those cities in. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Who just absolutely cares? Gun violence doesn't circumvent or erase the liberty of citizens to keep and bear arms. Period.
Yeah.
Any more than a person who walks into a school or a theater or any other place and screams fire eliminates the ability for me to stand in the public forum and hold public servants accountable. It's kind of the same argument I've been using with people. I've been working a lot with nurses and other medical professionals and medical employees in this area, and I'm ranting now. So theory, when you do this, you have to put a banner across the TC rant. It's everybody out there keeping their fingers crossed for their conscientious or religious or philosophical exemption from the jab. Stop playing their game. Stop playing their game. Don't give them the exemption that they want. Make them fire you.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. Make them fire you. And if you want to fill that out, fine. But understand, if you give them the authority or the power to look at your religious exemption justification, you're allowing, whether it's a government entity or a private entity, you're allowing them to dictate to you whether or not your religious or philosophical views are valid.
Yeah.
And they don't have the authority to do that.
The other advice I'll give is do not play their game. Instead, just ask them questions. If they tell you, no, you have to get the vaccine, just be like, isn't my private medical information protected? And just, are you sure this is legally lawful? and keep asking those.
Wouldn't want it to be lawfully illegal.
Well, you know what I mean. Keep asking legal type questions of them, because then you're not saying that no, you can't make me do this or anything like that.
Right.
Because if you start doing that, then they can actually find other reasons to get rid of you. But
Yep.
if you keep asking them questions, they are going to get angry and probably fire you anyway. But you haven't done anything. You've kept the moral authority. You've kept yourself within total legal bounds. Then it becomes just discrimination.
Exactly, and that's been my argument with so many people is you have to stop playing their games.
Mhm.
And that's been where our biggest problem has been in a lot of this is they learned very well from their godfather, Saul Alinsky and others. We'll have to do a show about him sometime. Mike's eyes, Skipper's eyes just glazed over. He was like, "Oh, here he goes again." And I know we have to get to wrapping this up, but they learned very well. And one of his rules was, in his rules for radicals, was make your opponent play by their own rules. And here's been what's been the downfall of conservatism, constitutionalism in the United States is we've let them make us play by their rules, by their rules. But we've been no good at making them play by their own.
Yeah.
So they come out against somebody and try and cancel them using cancel culture. Where are we? We're not coming back at them, and we have to get much better at that. When they try to shut us down, or they give us some reason and say, no, technically I don't have to answer that question. I don't have to do that. And we need to get much better about that. And whether it's a Kyle Rittenhouse case or it's challenging whether or not so here we go. We're going to go full circle, people. Are you ready? Whether it's Kyle Rittenhouse, whether it's bad jokes by the skipper, or it's naming a ship after somebody who has no military clout at all, never been a commander in chief. So what, he got kicked out of the military for his whatever. We have to start making them play by their rules. And they want to talk about equity. Okay, fine. You're going to make them play by equity, whatever the case might be. And we have to get back to that. And we have to start using their tactics against them. Now, there's a way to do it without sinking to their level, which is what I've been telling people for a long time, but especially for the last almost 2 years now. And I think we're at that place now.
I think with what we saw in Virginia, I'm very emboldened by the future. I think what we're seeing, there's a guy on Twitter who I do not like. He's a journalist. I don't personally like him, but one of the people in the network showed me something he said, and I thought it was quite brilliant. He said, all this is
you can't do that without naming his name.
Fine, I will. It's Jack Posobiec.
Posobiec. You still can't say it. That's fine.
Yeah, even though I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, I have never been good with the Polish names.
Prosobiec. There we go, Skipper.
He said, this whole thing is coming about with CRT because they forced students to stay home last year, and teachers actually found, or parents found out what their kids were actually being taught.
Been saying it for months.
And that's quite brilliant. It's a brilliant observation because it absolutely is true. And this is the natural next step. What's going to come after this is you're going to have parents forming organizations beyond parent-teacher organizations. You're going to have parental rights organizations.
School districts are bleeding out right now. Parents are pulling their kids out. They're starting. We just had this happen here in Minnesota. We just had a group of very, I find it ironic that they did this, but they pulled their kids out and they formed their own coalition and started a conservative arts school, and which shows that they completely misunderstood the whole point of the liberal arts program, which had nothing to do with leftism, but had everything to do with classical liberalism. the school districts are going to bleed out because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And
so I'd recommend people definitely reread John Locke. He laid it out over 300 years ago. Here's what to do. Our founding fathers followed it, tooth and nail.
The two treaties on government is what you're referring to. Yeah. Who John Locke, by the way, got his entire theory from a man named Samuel Rutherford, who was a Scottish reformer, Presbyterian theologian scholar who wrote the book, who wrote the treatise called the Lex Rex, which got him persecuted. It got him absolutely persecuted because he said something that no one in the history, especially of the British colonies, but especially in the history of all of culture, really said something that no one had ever dreamed possible of saying, which had been for years. And if you ever listen to my rants on my Facebook wall, this,
I follow him because that's why I invited you to be on the show.
Rutherford said Rutherfordian philosophy took the world and set it on its head, literally set it on its head and said, no longer is the king law, but the law, referring to the natural law of God, the law is king, and even the king is subservient to that. And everybody's like, oh man, such a seminal work. Yeah, absolutely. But it also got him absolutely hounded and hunted. Yep. And Lockean philosophy is built on off of Rutherfordian theory. Cut that out. Yeah, you did it to me. This is your fault. It's built off of what Rutherford said. There, I got it without making up a word. And that's what the highest ruling authority in the United States is not the president. It's not a governor. It's not a mayor. It's the Constitution. And that's
law, not a nation of men.
Right. And that's why when people, and I'm sure you have this conversation with people, well, we're a democracy. No, we're not. We're a republic. Because in a democracy, the wolf gets to pick which one of the sheep it gets to eat. Yeah. And that's where we've been for a long time. Mm-hmm. And people are, like you said, have been awakened, not woke. They've been awakened to this.
Yes. And, following you and I were both students of history, as people can now see. You and I, we've seen things like this in history play out before. We know what the next 2 and 3 steps are. And, as long as we keep on the path and following, following our principles, I think we will come out victorious.
I win in the end anyway.
It's not too often in history that the people on the side of more freedom lose. It's not that often.
No, not normally. Not normally. No.
And that's also the side that even if they do lose, eventually history decides that they were the ones who were right.
Yeah. So even if you're dead, you can take solace in the fact that you were right. Darn it.
Hey, but we make sacrifices today for the people of tomorrow.
For our children and for our children's children, really.
Yep.
And well, some of us are old enough to know what our children's children are going to be. So
I think this is a good ending point for today's
Absolutely.
show. I think it was a good show, good discussion that we had here. This is exactly what I wanted with a co-host.
That theory, leave that in. Because the next episode, he may not say that. So